We continue now at the top of Daf Kuftes Zayin Amud Aleph Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 116a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was dealing with the machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda regarding the halacha of taking collateral. The halacha is that if a person takes a rechayim v'rechev, so then there's going to be a violation of a lav because that is something that is used to prepare food. But Rav Huna said, let's say for example, a person takes a rechayim, which is a millstone. Rav Huna said there is an added lav. The added lav comes from the pasuk of ki nefesh hu chovel. And the Gemara had on the previous Amud that Abai and Rava argued in a similar case. Let's say a person eats from the carbon pesach and it's not roasted. Let's say, for example, it's raw, or let's say it's cooked. So Abai said there, you do not get an additional lav because the pasuk says ki im tzliyesh, because that's considered what we call a lav shebichlolus. And so the Gemara is in the middle of saying that Abai says to you that really I can follow even Rav Huna, because Rav Huna only said you get the additional lav when it comes to taking a rechayim v'rechev, let's say, as a collateral. There you get the additional lav because the pasuk there that says ki nefesh hu chovel is yiseruhu. That's an extra pasuk, and kevon de yiseruhu, since it is extra, shadya arechayim v'rachav. So then you're able to throw it on to the cases of the millstone and say there's an additional lav. Aval hacha, but over here ki im tzliyesh lav yiseruhu. The pasuk of ki im tzliyesh is not an extra pasuk. To me boy le l'chidatanya, because it's needed for what was taught in the following brisa. The brisa says we actually learn something from ki im tzliyesh. We learn b'shah sheyeshno bekum echol tzli, at the time that you're supposed to be eating the carbon pesach roasted. That's yeshno b'bal tochal na. That's when there's a prohibition to eat it. Let's say it's raw. However, b'shah she'eno bekum echol tzli, but let's say it's a time when there is no obligation to eat it roasted. So then eno b'bal tochal na. So then there's no negative commandment in terms of eating it raw. And Rashi explains Yiseruhu again when we talk about ki nefesh hu chovel. That's an extra pasuk, meaning lelav. It's an extra pasuk to teach us an additional lav, an additional negative commandment, mishum shar devarim, as we said, because it comes to include, let's say you take other vessels which are used to prepare food. If you take those also, again, as collateral, that's going to be a violation. V'kevon de Yiseruhu lelav. Now, since it's extra for this lav, v'kos ve'stam, and it's just written stam, so shad yanami arechayim v'rachav, so you can throw it on as an extra lav. Let's say you take millstones as well. She'ein lach lahotziam mimashma ki nefesh hu chovel al karchach, because there you shouldn't take it out. The mashmos of ki nefesh hu chovel, that is true when you're taking a rechayim. That's true when you're taking a rachav as well. And so therefore you can, so to speak, throw that lav as an extra lav in those situations. Aval hacha, but over here, ki im tzliyesh, lav liazhara asalo sofa. Here the pasuk when it says ki im tzliyesh, that's not coming to add any kind of warning. Lav lo sofa, lav yisera, it's not coming to add an extra lav. Elachidatanya, rather it's to teach a different halacha. It's a particular of the halacha, like we learn in a brisa. We learn in the brisa again, mikol makom no mavushal mashma bay she'eno over b'no mavushal biyom ela b'layla, means to teach you that let's say you have na and mavushal. The idea is that you only transgress na and mavushal if it's going to be at night, at the time you're supposed to be eating the carbon pesach roasted, but you're not going to violate na and mavushal. You're not going to have those transgressions if it happens during the day. That's what the brisa teaches, and therefore that's not going to throw on an additional lav. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasi de Rav Yehuda. We have a brisa that supports Rav Yehuda. Again, Rav Yehuda says that you don't get malchus for the additional lav of ki nefesh hu chovel. And Rashi explains that the proof to Rav Yehuda is actually coming from the following two brises. We're going to combine the two brises to create the proof. In any case, the first brisa says, Chaval zug shel saparim, if a person takes as collateral a barber's scissors. Now, Tosas does ask on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, why is a barber's scissors considered to be something that is ochel nefesh? It has nothing to do with preparing food. So he understands that we're talking here about scissors that are in some way preparing food. Again, that's Tosas on Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. And vitzemet shel paros, let's say a person takes the yoke of the cow. It could be the cows together with the yoke. You take that as collateral, chayiv shtayim. So it says in this brisa, he's chayiv too. Zeb bi'atzmo v'zeb ba'atzmo. Now let's say you take each one independently, meaning to say, let's say the yoke is made of two parts and you take a part independent, just one part of it, or you have scissors made of two parts, you're just taking one part. So eino chayiv ela achas, then he's only going to be chayiv one. V'tanya idach, and we learned in another brisa, chaval zug shel saparim, again the same case. He takes as collateral the barber's scissors, v'tzemet shel paros. He takes the yoke of the cows. Yachol lo yehe chayiv el achas. I might think he's only chayiv one. Talmud lomar lo yachavo rechayim v'rochav. It says you can't take the lower and the upper millstone. Ma rechayim v'rechav shein miyuchadim shnei kelim. Just like rechayim and rechav is really two vessels. However, v'osin malacha achas, but they do one malacha. They do one kind of work. V'chayiv al zeh b'fnei atzmo v'al zeh b'fnei atzmo. When you're chayiv on each one independently, you take each one independently. You're going to be chayiv. Af kol dvarim shein shnei kelim miyuchadim. So too anything which can be considered two distinct vessels. V'osin malacha achas, and they do one malacha. Chayiv al zeh b'fnei atzmo v'al zeh b'fnei atzmo. He's going to be chayiv on each one independently. Now the point over here is the two that you are chayiv is essentially because you're taking two vessels. The scissors have two parts. The tzemed, the yoke, has two parts, and so therefore it's considered like you're taking two vessels, but you don't get the additional third lav because of kinefesh uchovel, and that's why it is a proof for what Reb Yehuda says. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garcin and Tanya Kavasi de Rav Yehuda Chaval Zug Vitanya Idach. The gears of Rashi is Vitanya, and there's a second brisa because you need the combination of both brises. Velo Garcin and Tanya Idach. Don't have the gears, so the text should not be just Tanya Idach without the vav. To mitarvayim masnisa mitarit sayata, because we're using the combination of the two brises for the proof. Velo michad minayu. It's not that we're learning from one of the brises. To imishum dekatani chayiv beis velo gimel, because if you're going to say the proof is sufficient just because it says you're chayiv 2 and not 3, ha'afilu Rav Huna moda, even Rav Huna would admit to that. To mehechi teisi ahani lo ksivi u'mechi nefesh uchovel hu denafki, because these are not written in the pasuk. These specific items, these vessels are not in the pasuk, so they are learned from ki nefesh uchovel. Tiakol chad koi ki nefesh, because ki nefesh goes on each one. Elamitarvayu masnisa masuk masayat Rav Yehuda. That's why you need the combination of the brises in order to have the proof for Rav Yehuda. Chaval zug shel safarim, as we're about to explain. Again, he takes this zug shel safarim, the barber scissors. Misparayim shel safarim, it's the barber scissors. Vehin shel prakim, it has two parts. V'chol chad kli be'apei nafshi, each one is its own vessel. V'osen hamalacha ben shneim, and they do the malacha by combination. Karechayim v'rechav, just like rechayim v'rechav. Chayiv shtayim, he's going to be chayiv 2. Mishum ki nefesh, because of ki nefesh al kol echad. In other words, we are applying the pasuk of ki nefesh uchovel on each kli. The scissors is made out of two parts. Again, the same thing is true by the cows, by the yoke of the cows. And so therefore we're going to say we apply ki nefesh to each one. Afal bisha shneim tzrichin l'malacha achas, even though they're both necessary to complete one malacha, you count it as 2. V'chein semet shel paros, the same by the yoke of the cows. Chaval beis paros choshos im tzamadan. The way Rashi learns is you take two cows. Some say you're really just taking the yoke, but you take two cows together with the yoke as the collateral. Dahainu nami klei ochel nefesh, that's also considered vessels for food. V'nira be'enai sha'ol shalahen shal prakam have. Rashi says, it seems to me that the yoke was made of two parts. V'tanya idach, and we learned in another brisa, and again, here's where you need the other brisa for the proof, because everybody agrees these particular items are not written in the pasuk, so everybody agrees with these items that kinefesh uchovel goes on these. But now from the other brisa, V'tanya idach the yolef l'hume rechayim v'rechev, we learn it from rechayim v'rechev in the second brisa. Second brisa is essentially saying, just like rechayim v'rechev, we say that you're chayiv on each one independently, so too here, that sounds like by rechayim and rechev as well, you're only going to have 2 lavin. The yolef l'hume rechayim v'rechev, the iske shar devarim l'rechayim v'rechev b'chad kura ma rechayim v'rechev. Other things are compared to rechayim v'rechev, v'chayiv al zeh bi'atzmo v'al zeh bi'atzmo, you're chayiv on each one, the rechayim and the rechev independently. Sharei pirshon akasav levara azhar l'chol echad li'atzmo, that's why the pasuk specifies each one. Afkol umidiyolef l'hume rechayim v'rechev, that's the proof. From the fact that we're learning this out from rechayim and rechev, shma mina b'rechayim v'rechev chayiv nami shtayim, you see by rechayim and rechev also, you're chayiv 2, kamar, that's what we're saying, v'lo shalosh and not 3, v'hainu k'Rav Yehuda, that's why this is like Rav Yehuda. V'yim tomer, now if you're going to ask, masnisa kamaisa l'mayayisa, why do we even need the first brisa at all? We're learning from rechayim v'rechev, hachanami shamina lami basraisa, wouldn't we be learning the same thing just from the last brisa? But that's not true. Imi basraisa, if you just had the latter brisa, chayiv al zeh bi'atzmo v'al zeh bi'atzmo kamar, it's just saying you're chayiv on each one independently. To lo azlin on basar malach el basar kelim, we don't follow the work that's being done, but we follow the vessels. Uli olam shalosh malkios, but maybe really there is going to be 3 malkios, maybe it's 3 sets. Achas mishum rechev, v'achas mishum rechayim, v'achas mishum kinefesh, you're going to get one because of rechev, one because of rechayim, and one cause of nefesh, that could have been true to koyat tarvaya, because that's going to go on them both. That's why we have the first one, that it's clear that we're talking about the fact that you're just chayiv 2 and not 3, and so again, that's why it's a proof to Rav Yehuda's opinion. And the Gemara continues, how gavra dechaval sakina dashkafta mechavre, there was a person who took as collateral a slaughtering knife from his friend. Asalakami de Abaya, he came before Abaya, Amar le said to him, Zila Hadra, you have to return it. The Havale Klisha Osam Bo'ochel Nefesh, that's a vessel that is used to prepare food, and therefore you're not allowed to take it as collateral. Vesu kum bedina Allah, and then you should take this person to court in terms of the amount of money that he owes you. Rava Amar Rava says, Lo tzarech lemekam bedin Allah, there's no need to take this person to court. V'yachol lito not kadei demand, because right now you have possession of the knife, and that actually means you can claim from the person up to the value of that knife. Essentially, you have that in your possession. But the Gemara continues, V'abaya lesle ha'yisvar, does Abaya not hold of that logic? He doesn't hold that if you're in possession of something, so then already you don't need to go to court, you're essentially in possession, it's the other person who has to prove. Ma'ishna mehanu easy, what's the difference from the case of the goats? The achli chushla b'nahardoi, they ate peeled barley in nahardoi. V'asam mara de chushla, and the owner of the barley came, v'tafaslu, and he seized the goats. V'katoin tuv, and he was claiming that he was owed a lot of money for the barley that was taken from him. V'yamar avua de Shmuel, and the father of Shmuel said, Yachol liton ad kadei demand. The same thing. He's allowed to make this claim up to the value of the goats because he's considered to be the one in possession because he sees the goats. So we see already that this is true according to Shmuel, according to the father of Shmuel. So Shunt Abaya agreed to this as well. And the Gemara makes a distinction and says, Hasam over there by the case of the goats, lav midi da'avda l'shule u'la'gurehu. Those are not things that are normally lent or rented out, and so possession actually means something. But over here, when you're talking about a slaughtering knife, midi da'avid lo shole u'la'gorehu. That's something that is generally lent out or rented. Just having possession doesn't really prove anything because you may have been renting it out or you may have been borrowing it. To shalach Rav Huna bar Avin, because Rav Huna bar Avin sent devorim ha'asuyin lahashul lahaskir. When you're talking about things which are generally lent or rented out, v'yamar lekuchen hein biyodi, and the person claims, oh, I bought it, it's really mine, eino nemon. He's not believed. That alone, possession is not enough in those situations, and so therefore that's the distinction that Abaya will make. But the Gemara continues, V'Rava lesle haisvar, does Rava not hold of that idea that if it's something that is generally lent or rented, therefore possession does not mean anything? Because Rava seems to be saying that in this situation, the possession does mean something. V'Rava apik zuga de sarbula, v'sifra dagarata miasme. But Rava took away, this is the scissors that's used for wool, and a scroll of agarata, he took that away from orphans, b'dvarim huasuyin lahashu lahasker, because it's things that are made to be lent out, to be rented out. Possession doesn't mean anything. So why over here does possession by the case of the slaughtering knife mean something? And the Gemara says to that, Amar lach Rava, Rava will say to you, Hai Nami, in this case also, Kavan de Mifkama, since something could go wrong and it could be damaged, the slaughtering knife, Kapti Inshi Velo Mushli, people don't want their slaughtering knife to be damaged, and therefore people are strict about it and they don't lend it out. Therefore it's not something that's generally lent out, and possession does mean something. And Rashi explains, Sakina da Ashkafta shall beis hamitbachayim shemekatzvim bo basar. Rashi says it's referring specifically to a knife essentially that's used by a butcher. V'sa kum bedina, and then he said, go take him to court. This was Abaya. Taveu ledin al chovach, you have to take him to court in terms of what he owes you. In modalach, maybe he'll admit to you, or yesh edim yishalim, or if there are witnesses he'll pay. V'im lav, and if not, yishava shvuas heses, he'll take a shvua. Rava Amar Rava says, Kavan de moshchene, since he took the possession of this knife, vein edim shemoshchenu, and you don't have witnesses to that, hayayachol liton lekucha hi biyadi, so really he could just claim he bought it and it's his. So therefore he has possession. So lo tzarich lemekam bedine lave, so he doesn't even need to take him to court. To kanale mashkon lishava velito lad kedei damav. Now he's acquired the mashkon that he can now take an oath and collect up to its value. Then we had the case with the chushla, the saor and klufim, that's the peeled barley. Lav midihu da'avid l'shule. So then again, the Gemara said it's not something that's normally lent out, talking about goats. She'ena da maskir or mashal izim shalo. A person doesn't rent or lend out his goats. Hilkach yachol lito l'kuchen hein biyadi. Therefore, you do have a claim of possession because you could have claimed that you bought it. Heichadein edim sha'asfa me'ereshusam shal balein, as long as there's no witnesses that you gathered them from the possession of the owner. And then the Gemara talked about zuga de sarbala, which again is misparayim shegozin b'em tzemer, that's scissors that are used to cut wool, to shear wool. Afilu miyasme, even from orphans, shehiviu habaylam edim shahayu shalohen. Let's say the owners bring witnesses that it's theirs. V'hein toanin hishalnum la'aviyem shalelu, and they claim we just lent it to their father. V'yafkinu Rava minayu. Rava said you have to take the items away from the orphans. Mishum devarim hasuin lahashal lahaskir, because those are things that are generally lent out or rented out, so therefore possession doesn't mean anything. V'misa diyacholiton lakuachu biyadi yasmi kilotanu nami anon taninon lahu. Now, if you're able to claim that you purchased it, so by orphans we generally make claims on behalf of orphans, and then the Gemara eventually said that Rava just makes a distinction between different items. When it comes to knives, people don't want to lend it out because they don't want the knife to be damaged. Hadron alocha makabel. We will return to you Perek HaMakabel. This is the end of the 9th Perek of Meseches Bava Metzia. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will begin in the next video, the 10th Perek of Meseches Bava Metzia on Daf Zayin Amud Beis.